Pedro woke up in his apartment, a modern building with glass walls that reflected the vibrant city outside. The morning sun illuminated the space, but the light couldn't dispel the darkness that inhabited his heart. He felt like an empty shell, filled with success but devoid of life. The minimalist, cold, and impersonal environment mirrored his life, full of professional achievements yet lacking human warmth. As he stretched, his eyes fell on a yellowed letter lying on the table. It was a correspondence from the nursing home where his mother, Maria, was staying. He had received that letter weeks ago, but had never found the courage to open it. The envelope felt like a warning, a reminder of his neglect and the pain he was trying to avoid. Pedro sighed, his heart tightening at the thought of his mother's fragility, who once was a strong and vibrant woman. "I need to go to the office," he murmured to himself, as if the routine of meetings and numbers could ward off the haunting thoughts. He quickly dressed, putting on a suit that projected an image of competence and control. But inside, he felt like a lost teenager. The reflection in the mirror showed a successful man, but his mind was far away, lost in childhood moments he preferred to forget. At the San Francisco nursing home, Ana Clara, a dedicated and passionate nurse, observed her surroundings with a critical eye. The day was cloudy, and the fogged windows let in only a weak light, creating a somber atmosphere. She walked through the halls where residents sat in wheelchairs, some staring into the void, others engaged in nearly inaudible conversations. Each face she saw told a story of abandonment, and her heart ached at the thought of the condition many were in. "Good morning, Dona Maria," Ana Clara said, approaching a woman with white hair who was gazing out the window. Maria turned slowly, a timid smile appearing on her wrinkled face. "Ah, Ana, dear. How are you? You always look so beautiful," Maria replied, her voice soft yet filled with sadness. Ana Clara sat down beside her, holding the elderly woman's hand and feeling the fragility of her skin. "I'm well. And you? How are you feeling today?" Ana asked, trying to keep the conversation light, but the concern in her eyes was evident. "Today? I miss my son," Maria said, looking toward the horizon. "He doesn't come to visit me. He must be very busy with his work." Ana Clara felt a knot in her throat at those words. She knew that Pedro, Maria's son, was a successful man, but she also understood that this apparent achievement didn't make him immune to guilt. "He cares about you, Dona Maria. He just needs some time to understand that," she replied, trying to comfort the elderly woman. "Time. What is time, my dear?" Maria began to speak, her voice fading into memories. "I spent so much time fighting to raise my son, and now he doesn't have time for me." Maria's eyes filled with tears, and Ana Clara embraced her tenderly, wishing she could alleviate the pain of that woman. Meanwhile, in his mind, Pedro found himself surrounded by charts and reports. The phone rang incessantly, and he answered automatically, discussing profits and market strategies. But somewhere deep inside, a part of his soul was screaming. He tried to concentrate, but the image of his vulnerable mother in the nursing home haunted him. He knew he needed to visit her, but the fear of confronting his own guilt kept him trapped in his comfort zone. Flashbacks began to invade his mind. He remembered moments from his childhood when Maria struggled to support him alone. Memories of cold nights when she would wrap him in a blanket, her tired eyes filled with love. "I will always be here for you, my love," she would say as he snuggled beside her, feeling safe. The image of his strong and brave mother contrasted starkly with the reality of the woman he had not visited. "Pedro, are you all right?" A colleague interrupted his thoughts, and he quickly composed himself, forcing a rehearsed smile. "Yes, of course. Just a little tired." "Tired? Or worried about your mother?" The colleague, who knew a bit about Pedro's family situation, shot him a knowing look. "You should go visit her. An extra hour at work won't make a difference." The colleague's words echoed in Pedro's mind, but he stepped away, immersing himself back into his work. The weight of guilt was a shadow that followed him, but he strived to ignore it. Back at the nursing home, Ana Clara got up to check on the other residents, but not before promising Maria that she would return later. She couldn't ignore the situation, and determination grew within her. "I will find a way to improve life here. They deserve more," Ana Clara thought as she walked away. The day passed, and finally, Pedro decided it was time to face his reality. He got in the car and drove to the nursing home, his heart racing and his mind filled with doubts. The journey felt longer than usual, and every red traffic light was a reminder of his hesitance. What will I say? How will she receive me? He thought, wrestling with memories of love and abandonment. When he arrived at the nursing home, the environment felt even more oppressive than he remembered. He hesitated at the entrance, but finally he found the courage to step inside. The smell of disinfectant and the dim light enveloped him, and he felt like an intruder in a world he had chosen to ignore. Pedro! Ana Clara's voice surprised him. She was in one of the hallways, organizing some files. You came! Her face lit up, and Pedro noticed the passion she had for her work. I was thinking about my mother. He began, his voice hesitant. I need to see her. She's in room 203. I'll take you there, Ana Clara said, guiding him through the hallways. As they walked, Pedro looked around, noticing the frailty and sadness in the faces of the residents. It was a world he had ignored for too long. When they arrived at his mother's room, Pedro paused at the door, feeling his heart tighten. I don't know if I'm ready, he said, almost to himself. She needs you, Pedro. No matter what happened in the past, you are still her son, Ana Clara replied, her voice encouraging. Taking a deep breath, Pedro pushed the door open and stepped inside. The scene hit him like a punch to the gut. Maria was lying in a bed, frail and pale, her eyes closed. The silence was deafening, and he felt the weight of guilt crush him. Mom, he whispered, approaching slowly. Maria opened her eyes and a hesitant smile appeared on her face. Pedro, my son, she said, her voice weak. You came. I am so sorry I didn't come sooner, he replied, feeling tears welling up in his eyes. I've been so busy. I always knew you were busy, I just wanted you to be happy, Maria said, trying to sit up in bed. Pedro rushed to help her, holding her hand gently. Her touch felt so familiar, yet so distant. I promise I'll do better, Mom. I'll be here more, he began to say, his voice choked with emotion. Don't worry, my love. I know you're trying. The important thing is that you're here now, she replied, her voice filled with love even amidst the pain. As they talked, Ana Clara observed the scene from outside, recognizing Pedro's internal struggle. She knew this was the beginning of a difficult journey, but also a reunion. Deep down, she believed there was still hope, even in the shadows of the past. Ana Clara walked through the hallway of the San Francisco nursing home, her heart heavy with the reality she faced every day. The smell of disinfectant mixed with the scent of wilted flowers served as a constant reminder that this place, which should be a refuge, felt more like a prison for many of the elderly residents. She stopped in front of Maria's room and took a quick glance inside. Maria was sitting in a chair, staring blankly out the window, lost in thought. The spark in her eyes that once radiated life was now dull, as if hope had drained away with the passing days. Ana Clara knew Maria's condition was critical. She was well aware of the lack of resources and the dehumanization faced by the residents. Taking a deep breath, she was determined to do something about it. It was her mission to ensure that every patient was treated with dignity and respect, and somehow Maria was her priority. She entered the room and smiled at Maria. Good morning, Mrs. Maria. How are you feeling today? Maria slowly turned her face and a faint smile appeared on her lips. Hi, Ana. I'm here, right? The response was a mixture of resignation and sadness, and Ana Clara felt her heart ache. I brought you some gelatin. Would you like to try it? Ana Clara asked, trying to bring a bit of joy to Maria's day. Oh, sweetheart, gelatin is always good. Thank you, Maria replied, accepting the snack. Ana Clara began to feed Maria, watching as she struggled to chew each spoonful. The silence was filled only by the sound of the spoon and the elderly woman's labored breathing. Meanwhile, in the director's office, the atmosphere was quite different. The director, a burly man with a cold, calculating gaze, sat at his desk, surrounded by piles of papers and financial reports. He wore a disdainful expression when Ana Clara entered without knocking. What do you want, Ana Clara? He asked, not looking up. Sir, I need to talk about Mrs. Maria. She isn't receiving adequate care. We need more resources for the residents, especially for those in critical condition like her, Ana Clara said, her voice firm, though her heart raced. Resources? And who do you think is going to fund that? We're operating in the red, and you want me to spend more money on an elderly woman who probably won't last much longer." The director replied, finally looking Ana Clara in the eye. The coldness in his tone made her shiver. "But she deserves dignified treatment, sir. Everyone here deserves it. We can't just ignore the health of the residents for financial reasons." Ana Clara exclaimed, her indignation rising within her. "You must understand, Ana Clara, that the nursing home is a business. If there's no profit, there won't be a nursing home. The life of an elderly person is not a priority for me or this institution," the director said, turning back to his papers, dismissing her words. Ana Clara left the office with a heavy heart, but determination pulsed within her. If the director wouldn't help, she would have to find a way to raise funds. She decided to fight for Maria and the other residents, even if it meant facing the indifference of the director and the entire system. The next day, while Ana Clara was organizing medications and checking on the patients, a scream echoed through the nursing home. "Help! Someone, please!" It was the voice of one of the residents, ringing out in the hallway. Ana Clara ran toward the sound, her heart racing. Upon reaching Maria's room, she found the elderly woman on the floor, pale and struggling to breathe. "Mrs. Maria, what happened?" Ana Clara asked, crouching beside her. Maria lay on her side, visible pain etched on her face. "I'm gonna call for help," Ana Clara shouted, already getting up to run to the infirmary. No need," Maria whispered, her voice weak. "I'm just tired, my child." "No, it's not just that. You need help, and I'm going to get it," Ana Clara replied without hesitation. Within minutes, the medical team arrived and began assessing the situation. Ana Clara watched, her heart in her throat, as they tried to stabilize Maria. After a few minutes that felt like an eternity, the doctors managed to help Maria get up and placed her on a stretcher. Ana Clara stayed by her side, holding the elderly woman's hand. "You're going to be okay, Mrs. Maria. I'm here with you," she said, trying to convey strength. When Pedro finally arrived at the hospital, the atmosphere was grim, and the smell of disinfectant and medications was overwhelming. He hesitated at the door of the room, looking at the bed where Maria lay, surrounded by monitors and doctors. The image of his mother, so fragile and vulnerable, deepened his guilt. The memory of unanswered letters weighed on his conscience like an anchor. "Pedro," said Ana Clara, upon seeing him standing in the doorway. She looked visibly shaken, but her determination hadn't faltered. "She needs you now." Pedro didn't respond immediately. He stood still, watching his mother, until he finally entered the room and approached the bed. Maria was pale, but still recognized her son. "Pedro," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Hi, Mom," he replied, struggling to keep his voice steady. "What happened?" "Just a fall, dear. I'm fine. I'm here," Maria said, trying to reassure him, but the weakness in her voice spoke louder than her words. "You're not fine, Mom? I should have come earlier. I should have taken care of you," Pedro murmured, guilt overflowing in his words. Ana Clara watched the reunion, feeling the tension in the air. "Pedro, she needs more care. The nursing home isn't doing enough," she said, breaking the heavy silence. "We need to fight for more dignity for the elderly." "I will do whatever it takes," Pedro replied, finally looking Ana Clara in the eye. "Whatever it is we need to do, I want to help. I can't let this continue like this." He looked back at Maria, who was watching him with a mix of love and sadness. "Promise me you'll be okay?" Maria asked, her expression vulnerable. "I promise, Mom. I'll stay here. I won't leave you alone again," Pedro said, determination beginning to bloom in his heart. Pedro walked slowly through the cemetery, the fresh flowers in his hands contrasting with the melancholy that surrounded him. The sky was overcast, mirroring the storm of emotions that engulfed him. He stopped in front of Maria's grave, his mother, and knelt down, carefully placing the flowers on the headstone. It was hard to accept that she was no longer there, that he had lost the chance to make amends and show her how much he loved her. "I'm sorry, Mom," he murmured, his voice breaking as tears streamed down his face. "I should have been here. I should have done more." Maria's voice echoed in his mind, resurfacing in fragments of memories that haunted him. He remembered as a child how she would embrace him after failures, how she always encouraged him to keep going, even when the challenges seemed insurmountable. As he lost himself in thought, Clara, his sister, approached with hesitant steps. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers, and her eyes were filled with pain and frustration. Pedro looked at her, his heart tightening as he noticed the look of disdain on her face. "You shouldn't have taken so long to come here," Clara said, her voice trembling. "Mom needed you, and you just disappeared." Pedro felt the sting of her words like a blow. "I know, Clara, I know I failed. But it wasn't easy for me. I was so focused on my career that I left everything behind. I left you and Mom." Clara let out a heavy sigh, placing her flowers beside Pedro's. "She deserved more than that. We deserved more than that. Do you remember what she did for us? The sacrifices? What I don't understand is how you could ignore all of that and live as if nothing happened." Pedro felt a wave of guilt wash over him. "I can't change the past, Clara. I can only try to do better now. I don't know where to start." "Maybe you should start by caring," Clara replied, her voice now softer but still heavy with pain. "At least that, you need to understand what she went through, what we went through." Pedro nodded, his eyes fixed on the grave. "I want to, Clara. I want to understand. I want to do something to honor her memory. I can't just stand here lamenting." His sister looked at him, a glimmer of hope appearing in her eyes. "Then let's do this together. We need to join forces and find a way to help others who are going through what our mom went through. We can't let history repeat itself." "You're right," Pedro said, feeling a new purpose beginning to form within him. "Let's do something that truly matters. Let's fight for those who have no one." The atmosphere around them seemed to change, as if nature itself were listening to their promise. The sun began to break through the clouds, casting rays of light over the cemetery. Clara smiled, a sad but determined smile. "Our mom always believed in the dignity of people. Let's honor her." As they stood up, a familiar figure appeared in the distance. Ana Clara, the nurse who cared for Maria at the nursing home, walked toward them with a serious yet gentle expression. Pedro saw her approaching and his heart raced. He remembered how she had been a safe harbor for his mother, and he was immensely grateful for her presence. "Hi, Pedro." "Hi, Clara," Ana Clara said, stopping in front of them. "I just wanted to come here and pay my respects. Maria was an incredible woman, and I'm sorry for your loss." Pedro felt a wave of emotion at her words. "Thank you, Ana Clara. You were a great support for her. I don't know what it would have been like without you." Ana Clara shook her head. "The truth is, I just did what anyone should do. She deserved all the love in the world, and now, more than ever, we need to ensure that others don't go through what she did." "We're thinking of doing something," Clara interjected. "We want to fight for improvements at the nursing home, so that other elderly people have dignity and care. Would you join us?" Ana Clara smiled, her eyes shining with determination. "Of course, I'm with you. Together, we can make a difference." Pedro felt relief and a new hope rising within him. With Ana Clara by his side, he knew he wasn't alone on this journey. "Let's honor Mom's memory. Let's make sure she's not forgotten, and that other elderly people receive the care they deserve." "Yes, together," Clara and Ana Clara said in unison, and the trio embraced symbolically, as if sealing a pact of love and solidarity. In the days that followed, Pedro, Clara, and Ana Clara dedicated themselves to planning a campaign to raise funds and raise awareness in the community about the conditions at the nursing home. They met whenever possible, sharing ideas and strategies, each bringing their own experience and perspective to the table. One night, while they were in Pedro's living room, Clara looked at the two of them and said, "We need a name for our campaign, something that captures the essence of what we're trying to do." Ana Clara thought for a moment and then suggested, "How about Dignity for All? It's simple but powerful. It captures the idea that everyone deserves to be treated with respect." Pedro smiled, admiring Ana Clara's passion. "I love that. It's exactly what we want to convey." "Then it's decided," Clara said, writing the name down in a notebook. "From today on, we are Dignity for All." The energy between them was palpable, and Pedro felt a wave of determination. He realized that the pain of losing his mother could become fuel for change, a legacy that could benefit many. Together, they were ready to face the challenges ahead, united by Maria's memory and the hope that, with love and dedication, they could make a difference in the lives of others. With each step they took, Pedro felt his heart opening. He was finally reconnecting with his past and with his family. The road ahead was still uncertain, but now, with Clara and Ana Clara by his side, he was prepared to face any challenge that arose. They were together in the fight for dignity, and that was all that mattered. Ana Clara and Clara met at a small cafe near the São Francisco nursing home, seated at a large wooden table that reflected the soft morning sunlight. The aroma of fresh coffee and homemade meals filled the air, but the atmosphere was charged with determination. They knew they needed to take action to change the situation at the nursing home and were there to discuss their ideas. We need a solid plan to raise funds and improve the conditions at the nursing home. We can't leave Maria and the other residents at the mercy of the director's indifference, Ana Clara said, looking into Clara's eyes with an intensity that reflected her passion for the cause. I completely agree, Ana. But how can we mobilize the community? What do you suggest? Clara asked, stirring her cup of coffee, her hands trembling slightly with nerves. Ana Clara thought for a moment, recalling how the community could unite around a cause that truly mattered. We could organize a fundraising event, something that catches people's attention and makes them aware of the reality faced by the elderly living here. Maybe a charity fair with food, music, and activities for families. Clara nodded enthusiastically at the idea. That sounds great. We could involve local artists to perform, and maybe even have a small cooking competition. People love that kind of stuff. And we can ask local businesses for donations. They could contribute prizes for the competition or items for the fair. The goal is to make everyone feel part of this, Ana Clara added, her enthusiasm growing as she spoke more about the plan. The two spent hours discussing details, organizing task lists, and planning how to approach businesses in the area. They knew the fight would be tough, but the vision of a better, more welcoming nursing home for Maria and the other residents motivated them to move forward. In the days that followed, Clara and Ana Clara began putting the plan into action. They went door to door, talking to shop owners, cafe and restaurant proprietors, explaining their cause and the urgent need for funds. The community's response was surprising. Many were supportive and willing to help. I always saw the nursing home as a sad place, but if you're fighting for change, I want to be part of it, said a local bakery owner who offered bread and pastries for the event. With each new contribution, their hope grew. The date of the event approached quickly, and they were busy organizing everything. They created colorful posters and distributed flyers around town, inviting everyone to the charity fair. On the day of the event, the sun shone brightly, and the square in front of the nursing home was decorated with balloons and banners. The food stalls were set up, and lively music echoed in the air. Clara and Ana Clara were nervous, but the excitement of the community around them was contagious. Look at how many people came. This is amazing, Clara exclaimed, her smile lighting up her face. Yes, and there are still more people arriving. This is just the beginning, Ana Clara replied, watching the crowd gather around the dessert stall. Soon, the fair was in full swing. Children were running around, laughing and having fun at the games. Adults chatted animatedly, and the atmosphere was one of celebration. Ana Clara and Clara took turns at the stalls, selling food and talking to visitors about the importance of supporting the elderly. During a break, Clara spotted Pedro approaching, hesitant, looking around as if he didn't know what to do. He seemed uncomfortable, like a fish out of water. Clara took a deep breath and decided to go up to him. Pedro, it's great to see you, Clara said, trying to hide her surprise. We're raising funds for the nursing home. You can help. Pedro forced a smile, but guilt was evident in his eyes. Hi, Clara. I saw the news about the event and thought I should come. But you don't know how to get involved, right? Clara interrupted, trying to be encouraging. You can help us spread the word about the cause. People need to know how important it is to care for our elderly. He hesitated, but then nodded slowly. Okay, I can do that. I'll help spread the word and see if I can get some donations. Ana Clara approached, noticing the conversation. Pedro, it's great that you're here. Feel free to join us. Every bit of help is welcome. Pedro looked at the two women, and for the first time, he felt a little lighter. He joined them, helping sell items and chatting with visitors. The connection he began to feel with the cause and the people around him was an important step toward his transformation. The event was a resounding success, and by the end of the day, the funds raised exceeded all expectations. Clara and Ana Clara were exhausted, but the satisfaction on their faces was undeniable. They gathered in a quiet corner of the square, away from the hustle and bustle. "I can't believe we did it. This was incredible," Clara said, breathless as she sank onto a bench. "Yes, and this is just the beginning. We need to make this an annual event. We have to ensure everyone understands the importance of caring for our elderly," Ana Clara replied, her eyes sparkling. Pedro, who was sitting beside them, felt a wave of gratitude. "Thank you for letting me be a part of this. I really needed this. I need to change my perspective and take responsibility." "We're glad you joined us, Pedro. You may not have been present before, but now it's time to look ahead and make a difference," Ana Clara said, with a sincerity that touched his heart. As night fell, the lights in the square created a magical atmosphere. People lingered, chatting and laughing, forging connections and sharing stories. The event not only raised funds, it also united the community in a way no one had anticipated. As they watched the lively scene, Ana Clara turned to the two and said, "This is all for Maria. She deserves us fighting for a better life for all the elderly." Clara nodded, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Yes, and we will continue this fight. We won't let what happened to her happen to anyone else." Pedro, moved by their words, felt his heart warm. He knew he had a long way to go, but now he had a purpose. The love and respect for his mother had transformed into a driving force, and he was determined to make a difference. At the end of the day, as they walked home, Pedro, Ana Clara, and Clara felt more connected than ever. What began as an individual struggle transformed into a collective mission, a legacy of love and resilience that would honor Maria's memory and ensure a better future for all the elderly residents of the nursing home. The atmosphere at St. Francis Nursing Home was thick with tension. Ana Clara, the nurse who had become the voice for the patients, felt increasingly pressured by the indifference of the director, Mr. Almeida. He was a stocky man with a gaze that conveyed disdain and a demeanor that spoke louder than words. That day, Ana Clara decided she could no longer remain silent. She walked into the director's office, a space that exuded an oppressive vibe, with gray walls and heavy furniture that seemed to weigh down on anyone present. The director was seated at his desk, absorbed in paperwork, when Ana Clara approached. "Mr. Almeida, we need to talk about Mrs. Maria," Ana Clara began, her voice steady, even though her heart raced. The director looked up but said nothing. He merely waved her away with his hand, as if shooing away a fly. "Mrs. Maria needs special care. Her condition has worsened, and believe me, the lack of attention is affecting not only her health but also that of many other residents," Ana Clara continued, determined not to back down. "Everyone here has their needs, Ana Clara," Almeida replied, his tone dismissive. "I can't just allocate resources to one patient. We have a budget to maintain." Ana Clara felt her anger rising within her. The director's coldness was unbearable. She took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. "But Mrs. Maria is not just a number on your spreadsheet. She's a person who dedicated her life to caring for others. She deserves dignity in her final days." Ana Clara protested, her passion shining through every word. Almeida raised an eyebrow. As if Ana Clara were a disobedient child. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "And what do you suggest? That I divert funds from other patients? That's not feasible. The reality of the nursing home is tough, and unfortunately, I can't do anything to change that," he replied, his sarcasm evident. Ana Clara refused to be disheartened. She knew the fight wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to find a way to help Maria. As she left the office, her resolve propelled her forward. If the director didn't care, she would have to act differently. In the following days, Ana Clara began to rally the nurses and some family members of the residents. She organized a meeting in the nursing home's dining room, where, with contagious fervor, she started to lay out her ideas. "We need to do something. We can't accept this lack of care," said Ana Clara, looking into the eyes of each person present. "If we all come together, we can raise funds and ensure our loved ones receive the attention they deserve." The faces around her showed a mix of skepticism and hope. Clara, Pedro's sister, was among those present. She had always been concerned about the situation at the nursing home and now felt they could be the change they had longed for. "I always thought there was nothing we could do. But maybe you're right," Clara said, prompting murmurs of agreement from the room. "If we all unite, maybe we have a chance." Ana Clara smiled as she saw determination growing among them. The idea of raising funds was just the beginning, but it meant they were ready to fight for their loved ones. They began planning events like bazaars and festivals to mobilize the community around the nursing home. Meanwhile, Maria's condition worsened. Ana Clara started visiting her daily, always bringing a bit of comfort and hope. Maria, with her tired eyes, always asked about Pedro. "Has he come to see me yet?" Maria inquired one day, her voice weak but filled with expectation. Ana Clara hesitated. She knew Pedro was overwhelmed with work, but didn't want to add to Maria's sadness. "He's very busy, but I promise I'll talk to him," Ana Clara said, gently stroking Maria's hand. Maria smiled, but Ana Clara could see the sadness in her eyes. Maria's loneliness was palpable, and it motivated Ana Clara even more in her fight. One afternoon, while Ana Clara was organizing a meeting to discuss the next steps for the campaign, a scream echoed through the halls of the nursing home. Her heart raced. She rushed to Maria's room and found the elderly woman on the floor, eyes closed and face pale. "Maria!" Ana Clara shouted, kneeling beside her. "What happened?" Other nurses arrived quickly, and after assessing the situation, they called for an ambulance. Panic set in, and Ana Clara felt a wave of despair. She couldn't lose Maria, not now that she was fighting for her. After the rush to the hospital, Ana Clara stayed by Maria's side, who was in a hospital bed surrounded by beeping machines. When Pedro finally arrived, a mix of guilt and love shone in his eyes. "What happened?" he asked, his voice choked. "She fell and passed out. We're doing everything we can to stabilize her," Ana Clara replied, sensing the tension in the air. Pedro looked at Maria, who lay unconscious, and guilt consumed him. He had ignored the messages and warnings, hiding behind his success. Now the fragility of his mother confronted him brutally. "I should have come sooner," Pedro murmured, pain evident on his face. Ana Clara felt it was the right moment to confront him. She stepped closer, looking into his eyes. "Pedro, your mother needs you. It's not just about what happened, but about what you will do from now on. You can change this," she said, her voice firm. He hesitated, but Ana Clara's words struck him deeply. Memories of his childhood, of Maria's love and care, flooded his mind, and the guilt that haunted him transformed into renewed determination. "I will get involved. I'll do whatever it takes to ensure she and the others receive what they deserve," Pedro promised, his voice heavy with emotion. Ana Clara smiled, but she knew the battle was far from won. They needed to face not only Maria's fragility, but also the director's indifference and the challenges ahead. But in that moment, hope reigned, and the fight for the dignity of the elderly gained momentum. Ana Clara was nervous but determined. The press conference she had organized was about to begin, and the event room was already filling up with reporters and cameras. The smell of coffee mingled with the tension in the air. She reviewed her notes once more, ensuring every detail was in order. "Did you know that this was the decisive moment to expose the truth about the neglect in the nursing home and the cruelty of the director?" When the press conference began, Ana Clara took the stage with Clara by her side. The audience was attentive, and the bright lights from the cameras reflected on her face. She took a deep breath, feeling the pressure of all eyes on her. "Thank you all for being here today," Ana Clara began, her voice firm and clear. "We are here to talk about the dark reality that hides behind the walls of the San Francisco nursing home. What you will see and hear from now on is a call for change, not just for Maria, but for all residents who deserve dignity and respect." Murmurs began to spread through the room. Ana Clara continued, "In recent months, we have witnessed not only a lack of care, but also the systematic abandonment of our elderly. The director of the nursing home, who should be looking after them, has shown himself to be indifferent and even cruel. Today, we will expose the deplorable practices that occur under his administration." Clara, at her side, held Ana Clara's hands in a gesture of support. She knew that what was about to be revealed could have serious consequences, but the truth needed to be heard. Ana Clara presented images and documents that evidenced the neglect. Here are Maria's health records. Observe the frequency with which she was seen by a doctor and the number of medications that were prescribed but never administered. This is not just a mistake. It is a violation of human rights. A reporter raised his hand, interrupting her. How can you prove that this is the director's fault? Could it just be a matter of lack of resources? Ana Clara looked directly at the reporter, determined not to be intimidated. The responsibility lies with the director. He is responsible for ensuring that resources are used properly and that every resident receives the attention they deserve. The truth is that he prioritizes profit over the well-being of the elderly, and that is unacceptable. The press conference continued, with Ana Clara and Clara answering questions and sharing stories of other residents facing the same dark reality. The atmosphere in the room began to change. Media interest grew as the story unfolded, and Ana Clara felt she was gaining momentum. Meanwhile, outside, the nursing home director watched the conference through a screen in his office, his face contorted with rage. He hadn't expected Ana Clara to have the courage to go this far. The last thing he wanted was to have his public image tarnished by these allegations. He knew he needed to act quickly to discredit Ana Clara and Clara. With a sharp gesture, he grabbed the phone and began making calls, trying to mobilize his contacts in the press to minimize the impact of the conference. That nurse is trying to destroy my reputation, he shouted into the phone. We can't let that happen. Do something. I want a favorable story out today. Back at the press conference, Ana Clara was about to conclude when another reporter raised his hand again. What if the director decides to retaliate? What will you do? Ana Clara hesitated for a moment, but soon responded with conviction. It doesn't matter what he does. We are here to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves, and we will not be silenced. The truth needs to be heard, and if we have to face threats, we will do it together. The audience applauded, and Ana Clara felt a rising warmth in her heart. She knew she was on the right path. After the press conference, as the reporters left the venue, Ana Clara and Clara moved to the side of the room, where they could breathe a little more easily. You were amazing, Clara said, smiling. I think we did it. I hope so, Ana Clara replied, still uneasy. But I know this is just the beginning. The director won't just sit back. That night, as Ana Clara reflected on the event, she received an unexpected message from Pedro. He invited her to meet at a nearby cafe. The tension between them had eased a bit after Maria's death, but Ana Clara was still cautious. What did he want? Upon arriving at the cafe, she found Pedro sitting at a table, looking serious. As she approached, he stood up and greeted her with a hug. I'm sorry for all the pressure you're facing, he said, his voice heavy with concern. I saw the press conference. You really gave it your all. Thank you, Pedro. But this is just the beginning, Ana Clara responded, sitting across from him. We need to prepare for what comes next. The director isn't going to give up easily. I want to help. I can't just stand by and watch, Pedro declared, determination in his eyes. I think I can do something to expose the truth about him. I have contacts that can help. Ana Clara looked at him, surprised. You want to get involved? After everything that happened? Yes, he replied firmly. I realized that the life I was living meant nothing if I wasn't making a difference. I want to honor my mother's memory and help change this situation. Pedro's words touched Ana Clara deeply. She knew that together they could make a significant difference. Then let's do it. Let's expose the director. We have to be careful, but we have a purpose now. The two committed to working together, joining forces to fight against the injustices that had been revealed. What started as an act of courage from Ana Clara was now becoming a joint mission. They knew the path would be difficult, but the determination in their hearts was stronger than any obstacle they might face. Meanwhile, the nursing home director felt increasingly threatened. News of the press conference was spreading, and he knew he needed to act quickly to save his position. He began planning his retaliation, determined to discredit Ana Clara and Clara at any cost. The confrontation was just beginning, and both sides were preparing for the battle ahead. After the tumultuous exposure of the cruel practices of the nursing home director, the city began to breathe a new air. The director, now dismissed, left behind a legacy of neglect that was slowly being replaced by hope and renewal. The NGO created by Ana Clara and Clara gained recognition and support from the community, while significant changes were implemented at the San Francisco nursing home. Pedro, who had previously been trapped in the prison of his own guilt, felt a rebirth in his life, now filled with purpose. One morning, Pedro decided to visit the nursing home again. The sun was shining brightly, and he couldn't help but notice how the entrance of the building seemed more inviting. The flowers in the flower beds were in full bloom, and the new security system that Ana Clara had helped implement made the atmosphere much more welcoming. Upon entering, he found Clara organizing activities for the residents. "Hi, Pedro." Clara waved, a smile lighting up her face. "It's great to see you here again. I feel like we're finally making a difference." Pedro smiled shyly. "It's good to be here, Clara. I believe we're all making a difference now. Ana Clara has truly transformed the place." Clara nodded, her eyes shining. "She's amazing, isn't she? Since the NGO started, donations have increased and we've been able to hire more nurses. The condition of the residents has improved a lot." As they spoke, Ana Clara entered the room, clipboard in hand, a determined look on her face. "Hey everyone, we need to discuss some ideas for upcoming activities. The community is really getting involved and I want to make sure we're prepared." Pedro watched Ana Clara, admiring her energy and passion. "Ana, how do you feel about all this? You've worked so hard to get here." Ana Clara smiled, a glimmer of satisfaction in her eyes. "It's truly rewarding. Every smile I see on our residents' faces makes me feel it's worth it. However, we still have a lot to do. We need more resources to ensure everyone receives the care they deserve." "And what about the director?" Clara asked, concern evident in her voice. "Do you think he'll try to retaliate in some way?" Ana Clara took a deep breath. "It's possible. He doesn't seem like the type to accept losing without a fight, but we're ready for that. The community is with us, and that's what really matters." Pedro felt a weight form in his chest. The fight for the dignity of the elderly was more than just a mission. It was a battle against selfishness and indifference. "I'm with you. If there's anything I can do, please let me know. I want to help in any way I can." "Great, Pedro," Ana Clara exclaimed. "We need someone with your influence to help mobilize more support. The fundraising event we're planning will be crucial." The following days were filled with planning and organizing. Pedro dedicated himself to mobilizing resources and contacts, while Ana Clara and Clara focused on activities that could bring joy to the residents. Local schoolchildren were invited to perform at the event, and the community began to rally around the cause. One day, while Pedro was helping organize materials for the event, he had the chance to talk to some of the residents. An elderly lady, Dona Elvira, approached him. Her gaze was gentle, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "You're Maria's son, aren't you?" she asked with a nostalgic smile. Pedro felt his heart tighten. "Yes, it's me. How are you, Dona Elvira?" "I'm better now, thanks to Ana Clara and the work you all are doing." She paused, looking down for a moment. "You know, I knew your mother. She was an incredible woman, always caring for everyone around her. I miss her." Pedro swallowed hard, the pain of loss resurfacing. "She cared a lot about you and everyone here. She did her best." Dona Elvira placed her hand on Pedro's arm. Her touch was soft and comforting. "You're doing something good now, my son, and that's what matters. Don't blame yourself for the past. What you're doing here is what really counts." Her words resonated with Pedro, bringing a new perspective on his own journey. He smiled, feeling warmth in his heart. "Thank you, Dona Elvira. Your words mean a lot to me." Finally, the day of the event arrived. The square in front of the nursing home was decorated with colorful balloons, posters, and donation tables. The community showed up in droves, and the atmosphere was one of celebration. Live music echoed through the air, and the laughter of children mingled with animated conversations. Pedro, Ana Clara, and Clara stood together on an improvised stage, ready to give a speech. Pedro took the microphone, feeling the energy of the crowd. "Good afternoon, everyone. We are here today to celebrate not only life, but the dignity of our seniors. What happened in the past cannot be changed, but together we can build a better future." Hearing the applause and cheers of support from the crowd, Pedro continued. "Today we honor the memory of my mother, Maria, and all those who didn't have the chance to receive the care they deserved. Let's make sure this never happens again." Ana Clara joined him on stage, her expression resolute. This event is just the beginning. Together, we can transform the San Francisco nursing home into a place where everyone is treated with love and respect. We need each of you to help make this happen. Clara also took the microphone, her voice strong and clear. Let's continue to fight for our seniors and ensure they have the dignified life they deserve. We are creating a new story, and each of you is a part of it. The crowd applauded, and Pedro felt a wave of emotion. He looked at Ana Clara, who gave him an encouraging smile. In that moment of hope and unity, he felt he had finally found his place. After the speech, many people approached to make donations and sign up for volunteering. Pedro felt engaged and part of something larger, something meaningful. He found Dona Elvira again, who offered him a warm hug. "You did well, my son. I'm proud of you," she said, her eyes shining with emotion. The night fell, and the event was an absolute success. Donations exceeded expectations, and the energy of hope and renewal hung in the air. As Pedro, Ana Clara, and Clara talked about next steps, he realized that through pain and struggle, he had found a new purpose. "This is just the beginning," Pedro said, looking at the two women who had become so important in his life. "Let's make a difference and ensure that the memory of my mother and others like her is never forgotten." Ana Clara smiled, her eyes full of determination. "Together we can change the world, one step at a time." The sun shone brightly in the sky as Ana Clara, Pedro, and Clara prepared for the annual event in honor of Maria, Pedro's mother. The chosen location was a community park, decorated with colorful flowers and banners celebrating not only Maria's life, but also the struggle of all those who had faced the pain of neglect and abandonment. The mood was cheerful, and the anticipation for the event was palpable. Ana Clara, in a light dress and a radiant smile, was organizing the last details at the information table. She looked at Pedro, who was helping set up the chairs. His eyes sparkled with a mix of nostalgia and determination. "Are you ready for this?" Ana asked, a hint of concern in her voice. Pedro paused, glancing around. "Yes, I am," he replied, taking a deep breath. "It's a way to honor my mother. I want everyone to know how important she was, and still is, to me." He looked at Ana, and there was a deep connection between them, a silent understanding of what that day meant. Clara approached with a determined look. "We need to make sure that my mom's story and the stories of all the other elderly people are heard. They deserve that," she said firmly. "And we are their voice now." Ana smiled, admiring her sister's strength. "Yes, and this event is just the beginning. We'll show the community that we can make a difference." As the event began, a crowd started to gather. Friends, family, and even strangers who had been touched by the cause were there. Pedro stepped up to the podium, his heart racing. He wasn't a speaker, but he knew he needed to say something. "Thank you all for being here today," he started, his voice a bit shaky. "We're here to remember Maria, my mother, who dedicated her life to caring for others. She was an example of love and sacrifice, and that's why we need to ensure that the lives of the elderly like hers are valued and respected." The crowd listened attentively, and some began to applaud. Pedro felt the positive energy surrounding him, and it encouraged him to continue. Maria shouldn't have spent her last days in a place where dignity was forgotten. That's why we are fighting, so that every elderly person receives the care and respect they deserve. Ana Clara watched Pedro, admiring the passion he conveyed. She knew how important that moment was for him, and what it meant for the fight they were waging together. When Pedro finished, he was met with warm applause, and it made him feel that he had achieved his goal. After the speech, Clara approached Pedro, her eyes shining. "You were amazing. The way you spoke about Mom, it was moving. She would be so proud of you." Pedro smiled, a bit embarrassed. "Thank you, Clara. I just spoke from my heart. And that's all we can do, right? Speak for those who can no longer speak." Soon, the event began to come alive. Local musicians performed, and people gathered around the tables, where Ana Clara had organized a series of informational materials about the NGO they were creating. The atmosphere was one of celebration, but also of struggle. "Do you remember when we were kids, and Mom used to tell us stories about heroes?" Clara asked as she grabbed a cup of lemonade. "She always said that true heroes are those who fight for others." "Yes, I remember," Pedro replied. "And now we are those heroes. We can't let her memory fade. We have to keep fighting, for her and for all the others who suffered. Ana Clara approached them, a smile on her face. And we have to do this together. That's what community is, supporting one another. Seeing everyone here today makes me believe we're on the right path. The afternoon continued with activities for the kids, artistic performances, and even a space for the elderly to share their stories. It was a moment of unity and recognition. People were having fun, but the message of love and solidarity was never far away. Later, an elderly man approached Pedro, his gaze deep. I just wanted to thank you and your sister for caring about us. Your mother was a wonderful woman, and knowing that you are fighting for us gives me hope. Pedro felt the weight of those words. We are here for all of you. We can't let the voices of the elderly be ignored again. Ana Clara, who had been nearby, overheard the conversation and joined them. We are creating a new story where each of you matters. The fight doesn't end here, and we need you by our side. The connection between them grew, and hope was in the air. As the sun began to set, a sense of accomplishment filled everyone's heart. It was a day that had everything to be special, and it truly was. At the end of the event, as the lights began to shine in the park, Pedro, Clara, and Ana Clara gathered to reflect on what they had achieved. I couldn't be prouder of us, Clara said, looking at the animated faces around her. We did something big today. Pedro nodded, a smile on his face. Yes, and this is just the beginning. We need to keep this energy and continue to fight. Our mother deserves that. Ana Clara looked at both of them, her expression determined. And together, we will make a difference. We'll show the world that the dignity of the elderly is non-negotiable. With that, they embraced, a symbol of the new family they were forming, united by struggle and love. The event was a success, but the real work was just beginning. And as they looked to the future, the certainty that they were on the right path filled them with hope and strength. The sun slowly set, casting a golden light over the San Francisco nursing home, now alive thanks to the efforts of Ana Clara, Pedro, and Clara. The NGO they had founded in honor of Maria was gaining recognition in the community. However, with success came new challenges that threatened to destabilize all the work they had accomplished. A meeting was scheduled at the NGO's headquarters, and the atmosphere was thick with tension. Pedro, Ana Clara, and Clara sat at the table, where a pile of documents and proposals were spread out. The camaraderie that had previously colored their discussions now felt more somber. We need to discuss the new investment proposal we received, Pedro began, looking at the faces of his friends. The investors are interested in funding our initiatives, but the conditions they are imposing are concerning. Clara frowned, uneasy. What do they want exactly? They want the NGO to shift its focus from care and dignity to something more profitable, like fundraising events that prioritize marketing over the well-being of the elderly. Pedro replied, his voice firm but laden with concern. Ana Clara sighed, already anticipating the direction the conversation could take. That goes against everything we've fought for. We can't let greed overshadow the care we owe our patients. I agree, Clara said, crossing her arms. But we need the money to continue our work. Without it, the NGO could close its doors. And who will suffer because of that? The elderly who depend on us. Pedro looked at Ana Clara, seeking her support. I think we need to meet with them and clarify our position. We cannot compromise our principles. But what if they don't accept it? Ana Clara raised an eyebrow, concerned. We need to be firm. What we're doing is more important than any amount of money, Pedro replied, determined. The three of them agreed to meet with the investors the following morning. The anticipation was palpable, but there was also a sense of foreboding that the conversation wouldn't be easy. The next morning, the NGO's meeting room was adorned with posters promoting dignity and respect for the elderly. Pedro, Ana Clara, and Clara waited for the investors to arrive, nervous yet resolute. When the investors finally entered, the atmosphere immediately turned tense. Good morning, began one of the investors, a man in a dark suit named Ricardo. We're eager to discuss investment opportunities in your NGO. We believe there's great potential for growth. We're glad to hear that, but we need to clarify that we're not willing to compromise our principles. Responded, looking directly into Ricardo's eyes. I understand, but we need to be realistic. The business world demands profit, Ricardo said, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. If you're not willing to change your approach, we might need to consider other investment options. Ana Clara couldn't contain her indignation. We're not here to make a profit. We're here to care for people. What you're proposing is dehumanizing. Clara, trying to remain calm, chimed in. We need to find a middle ground. We know that funding is essential, but not at the expense of our mission. Ricardo glanced at his team, who looked nervous. Listen, you have good intentions, but the world doesn't work that way. If you don't adapt, you'll be left behind. No one will want to invest in an NGO that doesn't generate financial results. It's not just about numbers, Pedro insisted. If we don't prioritize the needs of the elderly, what are we even doing here? We need an investment that respects our mission. The conversation grew more heated, and words flew like arrows. The investors tried to intimidate Pedro and his team, but they were determined not to back down. You have no idea what you're getting into. We can make you irrelevant, said an older, shrewd-looking investor named Carlos. Ana Clara, feeling her anger rise, shot back. Irrelevant? We are the voice of people who cannot defend themselves. We will not silence that voice, no matter how much pressure you exert. Pedro sensed the tension in the room escalating. We believe we can make a difference. The support of the community is our greatest strength, and we won't sacrifice that for easy money. The investors exchanged glances, clearly taken aback by the team's resistance. I think you need a clearer reality check. Community support may not be enough if there isn't a sustainable model, Ricardo said, trying to change his approach. Sustainable model? Sustainable for whom? Clara questioned. You want to turn what we do into a product. This isn't a business, it's a mission. Look, we're not here to discuss romantic ideals. We're here to find a way to make this business work, Carlos said, disdain dripping from his voice. The meeting dragged on, and the tension mounted. Finally, Pedro, realizing they were only drifting further apart, decided to be direct. If you're not willing to respect our mission, we can't continue this conversation. As a team, we will prioritize the dignity of the elderly above any profit. The investors, visibly irritated, stood up. You will regret this decision. The business world has no place for sentimentality, Ricardo warned as they headed for the door. And the world of humanity has no place for a lack of ethics, Ana Clara replied, firm in her convictions. As the investors departed, the NGO team sat in silence. The weight of their decision hung in the air. Pedro looked at Clara and Ana Clara, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. We did the right thing. Now we need to prepare for what comes next. But what are we going to do now? Clara asked, a little disheartened. We're going to seek support from the community, Ana Clara suggested. If they know what's happening, maybe they can help us. Pedro nodded. That's a good idea. We need to mobilize people and show that the dignity of the elderly is non-negotiable. And so, the team united to face the new challenge. With renewed determination, they began planning a series of events to raise community awareness about the struggle they were facing and the importance of protecting the nursing home and its residents. The voices of all the elderly depended on them, and they weren't willing to leave anyone behind. As they prepared for the fight, the trio realized that despite the difficulties, they were closer than ever, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. The investors' threats only reignited the fire of their mission, and they were determined not to back down. The fate of the nursing home and the elderly residents was in their hands, and they were ready to fight. Pedro sat at his desk, surrounded by papers and reports that seemed to multiply. The afternoon heat streamed through the window, but he was more concerned about the pressure he felt in his chest. The NGO that he and Ana Clara had helped to establish was gaining momentum, but the shadow of the past still haunted him. The fight for the dignity of the elderly had become his new mission, but now he faced a new challenge. A group of investors who saw no value in the lives they were trying to improve. As he reviewed documents, an email caught his attention. It was an anonymous tip-off about corrupt practices among the investors who had become involved with the NGO. The body of the text was clear and direct, detailing suspicious transactions involving the diversion of funds intended for charitable institutions. With each line he read, his heart raced faster. He needed to investigate further. The next day, Pedro decided to meet with Ana Clara and Clara to discuss what he had discovered. They gathered at a small coffee shop, a cozy place that had become the team's meeting point. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the chatter of customers around them contrasted sharply with the gravity of the conversation they were about to have. "Hey ladies, I need to talk to you about something serious," Pedro began as he sat down at the table. Ana Clara looked at him, sensing the tense expression on his face. Clara raised an eyebrow, curious. "What happened, Pedro? You seem worried," Ana Clara said, placing her coffee cup on the table. "I received an anonymous email, and the content left me unsettled. It seems our investors are involved in corruption. They are diverting funds that should go to the elderly," Pedro revealed, his voice heavy with indignation. Clara's eyes widened. "What? This is serious, Pedro. Are you sure it's true?" "I don't have all the proof, but the details seem solid. We need to investigate this. We can't let them continue like this, especially now that we're starting to make a difference," Pedro asserted, his determination growing. Ana Clara looked into Pedro's eyes, sensing the passion and urgency in his voice. "So what do you suggest we do?" "We need concrete evidence before making any accusations." Pedro nodded. "I'll reach out to some sources. Maybe someone has information that can help us, but we need to be cautious. If they find out we're investigating, they might try to silence us." After the meeting, Pedro felt more determined than ever. He knew he couldn't let this slide. Over the following days, he delved deeper into the investigation. He spoke with former employees of the investors' company and reviewed financial documents, searching for any clues that could confirm his suspicions. One morning, while reviewing a report, he came across a transaction that didn't make sense. It was a substantial payment to a shell company. His heart raced. "This is a sign," he murmured to himself, quickly typing an email to Ana Clara and Clara. "I found something. We need to meet immediately," he wrote. Within minutes, the two replied, agreeing to meet at the same cafe. When they gathered, Pedro was visibly excited. "Look, I found a strange payment. A huge sum was transferred to a company called Constructora Nova Vida. I've never heard of this company before, and it doesn't seem to have any registered activities," he explained, handing the document to Ana Clara and Clara. "This is concerning," Clara said, analyzing the paper. "If this is true, it could be a significant breach of trust. We need to expose this." Ana Clara, her gaze fixed on the document, suggested, "We could take this to the media. If the investors know we're keeping an eye on them, they might reconsider their actions." "This is risky," Pedro replied, hesitating. "What if they try to intimidate us? They have power and influence." "But we also have the truth on our side," Ana Clara insisted. "If we can expose this corruption, we can protect the elderly and ensure the funds we raise are used as they should be." Pedro looked at the two of them, feeling their determination. He knew they were right. "Okay, let's do it. But we need to be ready for whatever comes next." In the following days, Pedro, Ana Clara, and Clara worked tirelessly to gather evidence and build a solid narrative. With the support of journalists who believed in the cause, they managed to schedule a press conference to expose the corruption. On the morning of the conference, Pedro was nervous. He knew he was about to confront powerful individuals, but he was also resolute. As they prepared backstage, he took a deep breath and turned to Ana Clara and Clara. "Are we ready for this?" he asked, his voice slightly trembling. "Yes, we have the truth on our side, and many people who believe in us," Ana Clara replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. Clara nodded in agreement, her expression determined. When they stepped onto the stage, the room was filled with reporters and cameras. Pedro felt a flutter in his stomach, but the presence of Ana Clara and Clara by his side made him feel stronger. He began to speak, his voice steady. "Thank you all for being here today. We are here to expose a serious issue that affects not only the elderly we care for, but also the integrity of our NGO and the community. Recently, we discovered evidence of corruption involving investors who promised to support our cause. These funds, which should go towards the dignity and care of our elderly, are being diverted for personal interests." The cameras captured every word, and he saw some journalists scribbling furiously. Ana Clara and Clara stood beside him, ready to support every step of the presentation. "We have documents proving irregular transactions, and we are determined to take this matter to justice. We need the help of the community and the media to ensure this doesn't go unnoticed. Pedro continued, his heart pounding with emotion. After the conference, the reaction was immediate. Social media began to buzz, and local media reported the story. The public was outraged at the possibility of corruption within an institution that was supposed to care for the elderly. But while the community rallied in support of the cause, the investors were not willing to let this go. They began to pressure Pedro and the NGO team, trying to discredit their claims and threatening legal action. "Pedro, we need to be careful. They're trying to intimidate us," Ana Clara said, worried. "Yes, but we can't give up. This is bigger than us. We're fighting for something worthwhile." Pedro replied, his determination unwavering. The fight was far from over, but Pedro felt they were on the right path. He knew that the truth, no matter how difficult, would always find a way to prevail. And with the support of Ana Clara and Clara, he was ready to face any challenge that came their way.